Everyone knows that the Nazis were evil personified. Hitler and his minions were responsible for millions of deaths through war, disease, starvation, torture, overwork, exposure, and of course, the intentional murder of their perceived racial enemies, primarily the Jews, Slavs, and Roma people of Europe, along with many others. Some of those perceived enemies were children, the living and the unborn. Nazi racism wasn't based on harmful old stereotypes alone. In the late 19th and the early 20th centuries, many doctors and anthropologists, especially in Northern Europe, but to a degree in the USA, Canada, England, and Australia, began to subscribe to the idea that groups of people were, by their biology alone, either superior or inferior. When it came to the Slavs of Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, as well as the Roma people, who at the time were called gypsies, and especially the Jews, the Nazis believed that these groups carried inferior blood. In the twisted logic of Nazi racial biologists, along with Hitler, Himmler, and Heydrich, and the other architects and perpetrators of the Holocaust, the Jews and others carried within their bodies the drive to either eradicate the German people or intermarry with them and dilute their supposed superiority. Adults carried this inferior blood, and so did children. The Nazis murdered 1.5 million of them in the camps and the killing fields of Eastern Europe. This grim total included the unborn, and most of the time, their mothers. Even by the time the Nazis built their 6 extermination camps in Poland, many of the Jews and the hundreds of thousands of Roma destined to be sent there did not believe the many rumors circulating through the ghettos and cities of Europe that the Nazis were building places where the primary purpose was murder. And many people, when they were finally rounded up and sent to the trains to places like Auschwitz, refused to believe that the rumors were true. Auschwitz-Birkenau was different in some ways from the other extermination camps, especially Sobibor and Treblinka. The main Nazi goal at Auschwitz was killing, as it was at the other camps, but there was also a vast machinery of workers which helped the Nazis profit from their crimes. Additionally, Birkenau had dozens of sub-camps all around it, each one with purpose: to work their prisoners to the point of death, where they were either murdered on the spot or sent to the gas chambers of Auschwitz-Birkenau. In Treblinka, and Sobibor especially, there was no work other than to assist the Germans in disposing of the bodies of their victims. The dead at Sobibor numbered somewhere between 200 and 300,000 people. At Treblinka, nearly 1 million people were killed. At both of these camps, the vast majority of victims were killed within a day of arrival, mostly less. It didn't matter if you were healthy or strong, man, woman, or child, or even a baby. You were killed, not put to work. And it didn't matter if you were pregnant or not. You were driven up the fenced-off slough or tube like cattle and gassed. Auschwitz-Birkenau. As you may know, at Auschwitz, arriving inmates were subject to the Selektion, the process the Nazis used to decide who would live for a while and who would die immediately. Old people, infirm, those with serious injuries, mothers with young children, and the terrified, untold number of unescorted children who had been separated from their loved ones in the chaotic process of getting on trains, or because they had already perished in some way. The people in charge at the ramp were Nazi officers, often doctors, like the infamous Josef Mengele. They were assisted by armed SS men and women, including some nurses and doctors, both inmates and officers, male and female. But many of the people helping new arrivals down from the trains, forming them into lines and sections and trying to calm them in the face of their fear, were inmates, under instructions to try and keep trainloads of desperate, fearful people calm. The inmates lied to most victims about what was happening in Auschwitz-Birkenau. Many women arriving at Auschwitz were pregnant. Most knew it, some did not. Generally speaking, several things could happen when a prisoner spotted a woman who was obviously pregnant. Many times, they were ignored. It took strength for the prisoners to pretend nothing would happen to the arrivals except a shower, food, and work. Many inmates simply could not talk to visibly pregnant women on the ramp. There was nothing they could do for them. There are many stories of mothers being separated from their young children, but most times, mothers or older relatives would be told or allowed to stay with their younger children, those generally under the age of 12 or so. Things stayed calmer that way. At times, there were new arrivals who had recently had a baby. Hearing rumors on the train or seeing the unpleasant atmosphere of where they had arrived, many women tried to hide their babies under shawls, blankets, or coats. When they were discovered, they were taken to the gas with their child. Some of the cruelest Nazi guards were women, and at a series of trials after the war, some of the female SS Aufseherinnen, or overseers, were found to have beaten or stomped babies to death. Others were noted for the way they tossed babies and small children into the gas chambers on top of those already packed inside like sardines. Inside the camps. Most women who tried to hide their children were found out right away. Most of the children that survived were eventually found. Tragically, some women were turned in by others, hoping to score extra privileges, food, or simply points with the inmate overseers or capos, the SS Aufseherinnen or male guards. When Auschwitz was liberated on January 27, 1945, there were between 100 and 200 children found by the Soviet Red Army. The previously innocent youngsters had either been prisoners for the sadistic experiments carried out by Mengele, had been successfully hidden by late arrivals to the camp, or had been sent to the camp from other areas as the Soviets approached. 200 out of hundreds of thousands that had been there. The stories of two Jewish doctors, a Romanian and a Hungarian. These are just two stories of many, some successful and some tragic, of people inside the camps trying to save the lives of children and pregnant mothers. Doctors were also made to make decisions about who would die and who would live, then and for the future. Dr. Gisela Pearl was a pioneering figure in her community. A successful gynecologist in the city of Sighet, she faced unimaginable challenges when the Nazis invaded northern Romania in 1944, leading to her deportation to Auschwitz. Initially tasked with obtaining blood donations from Jewish inmates, Pearl's life got even worse. The infamous Dr. Mengele discovered her expertise as a gynecologist. Forced to deal with pregnant women, Pearl confronted an agonizing decision: report them to Mengele and face their extermination, or take matters into her own hands to save both mothers and unborn children. Pearl chose the latter, performing abortions on dirty floors without instruments or anesthesia. Without proper medical equipment and in appalling conditions, she relied on her voice, narrating hopeful stories to her patients. Despite the physical and emotional toll, Pearl's actions were driven by a commitment to preserving life in the face of inevitable death. Her post-war journey was fraught with pain and loss. Liberated by the British Army, Pearl discovered the tragic fate of her family, with only her daughter surviving. In the United States, she was faced with the fact that, in the USA at the time, performing abortions was a felony, and she faced suspicion of war crimes initially. But as the reality of Auschwitz became apparent, she was exonerated in every way, and later contributed crucial testimony in the Auschwitz trials. Pearl went on to become a U.S. citizen, opening an obstetric practice in Manhattan and delivering over 3,000 babies, primarily to Holocaust survivors. Dr. Erno Vadaz was actually named Erno Weiss, but in the anti-Semitic atmosphere that existed in his Hungarian homeland before the war, he changed his name to a more Hungarian and less Jewish-sounding name to help him advance into medicine, one of the many fields in Hungary in which the numbers of Jews practicing was subject to a quota. Vadaz was born and raised in the small town of Nagykálló and graduated from the prestigious University of Budapest in 1913. In the decades before the war, he was a successful family doctor with much experience delivering babies. In the spring and summer of 1944, the primary victims of Auschwitz's last large-scale killings were Hungarians. The Hungarian government, allied with Hitler, had been under pressure from Hitler to turn their Jews over to him. In early 1944, an ultra-right-wing coup and military threats from Hitler caused the Hungarians to help the Germans round up and transport hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz. Vadaz was among those rounded up, and he was separated from his family. Later, before liberation, he learned that his entire family had been killed shortly after their arrival in Auschwitz. As a doctor, he was spared and was sent to the Kaufering subcamp in Dachau, near Munich, where he worked in the pregnancy unit of the filthy and poorly supplied women's hospital late in the war. Amazingly, 7 of the inmates were farmer long. Dr. Vadaz, despite tremendous difficulties and one very close call, delivered all the babies and made sure their mothers survived too. They had been allowed to live by an SS officer who no doubt was trying to save himself from the retribution he was sure would follow Germany's defeat. All but one mother lived to see their 80s. And as of 2018, all the children were alive. They and their children and grandchildren are all here because of one man. This has been History on Fleek. See you next time.